I walk in and all these people are like, hey, I got a problem, and then they're joking and laughing about it. And it's like the most beautiful illustration of humanity I'd ever noticed. At the end, we all stand around and hold hands. And there's like, I look around the room, there are 40 people holding hands. And I'm just crying, saying, this is so beautiful.
Hey there, my name is Sean, and this is Suicide Noted. On this podcast, I talk with suicide attempt survivors and ideators so that we can hear their stories. Every year around the world, millions, many millions of people try to take their own lives, and we almost never talk about it. We certainly don't talk about it enough. And when we do talk about it, when we engage, we're not very good at it. So one of my goals with this podcast and the recent tour is to have more conversations and hopefully better conversations with survivors, in large part to help more people in more places, hopefully feel a little less shitty and a little less alone. Now, if you are a suicide attempt survivor or ideator and you'd like to talk, please reach out. It's real simple. Shoot me an email, hello@suicidenoted.com. I'd love to talk with you. Now that the tour is over, and I am in Mexico right now for an extended period of time probably, though don't worry, I'm going to still do the podcast and all the podcast related stuff. I want to again thank everybody involved. Special thanks to Ambient, a past guest who helped me in many ways with the tour, logistics, social media, brainstorming. So thank you, Ambient. I had tour hosts or point people in every city. Thank you. I had other past guests and a handful of other people that I met out on the road who joined me to speak and share and have conversations. So thank you. Thank you to those who let us use their spaces, and thanks to everybody who attended. I'm sure I'm going to miss some other people. And of course, those who donated, thank you too. There's a lot of people to thank. And you know what? There will be more people to thank in the future as this work will continue. This month and into 2026, we will continue doing one episode every week, a new episode, and some weeks a second episode. Update, that might be special, that might be something else. We continue to have a goal of transcribing and translating all of our episodes. I'll be reaching out to some people who had expressed interest, and if you hear this and are interested in that kind of thing, because I realize it's not for everybody, do keep in mind, by the way, AI does most of the heavy lifting, but nonetheless, shoot me an email. I'd love to talk. We will be working on some kind of short documentary capturing the tour and some other things about this podcast, the work, the cause. And I am also hoping to get on some stages and invite some of my past guests to get on some stages, whether they are in real life or virtual. So again, if any of that piques your interest, let me know. And to my listeners, there will be a listeners meeting soon, certainly before the end of 2025. Remember, there's that poll on Spotify every week. Check it out. Finally, keep in mind, we're talking about suicide on this podcast like I've been doing for over 5 years now and more than 300 conversations. My guests and I, we do not hold back. That is intentional. Take that into account before you listen or as you listen. Of course, you can always hit pause or stop. But I do hope you listen because there is so much to learn. Today, I am talking with Janee. Janee lives in Washington State, and she is a suicide attempt survivor. Janee in Washington, I'm glad you're here. It's nice to meet you.
Well, thank you. Nice to meet you.
Sure. Number one, I looked at the stuff you sent me, some of the work you do and your poetry and your speaking and these books and this recent thing I want to ask about because it happened this past week in collaboration, I believe, with NAMI out in Seattle. Tell me a little bit about it. How did it go last week?
Yeah, so I am a writer, and I just wrapped up my 5th book, which was Risk and a Personal Exploration. Heretofore, it mainly just focused on poetry, but I had, after a couple of decades of no suicidal crises, I had a suicidal crisis during the pandemic. The exact date was July 14th, 2021. What I mean by suicidal crisis is, for the first time, like I said, in decades, my mind started spinning out, and I just went to my old faithful, which was I should just die, and how shall I do it? So then a couple of weeks elapsed, and I had a conversation with a gal pal, and I said, I'm really depressed and I can't get myself out of it. And she said, anytime you have a new book project, you seem to be in a better headspace. Is there something new you want to work on? And so the next day I went to the coffee shop. This is October 11th, 2021. And I had been writing around my suicidality for about 10 years at that point, but had never really targeted the subject. And on that date, I thought, okay, well, just insofar as having a new literary challenge, let's see where this goes.
Nice.
And so then for the next almost 4 years, I worked on what became this 300-page memoir that I have yet to find a publisher for.
It has a name though, right?
Yes, it's currently called Suicide in the Mirror.
Now, I don't know how often you've heard this podcast. I don't know if you know the gift that I bring to the world. It's much more than having conversations around suicide or suicidality. I have a gift for memoir titles. I've decided I have the gift. Now, usually what we do after I speak with somebody in a book they'll likely never write, we come up with a title. I don't need to do that with you. I'm not offended that you didn't reach out to me beforehand because you didn't know. Sure. And why would you care? And why would you invite me into that? Tell me the title again.
Suicide in the Mirror.
I like it. Does it have a subtitle?
A lyric memoir. Just to, make clear that as a literary artist, I have an interest in, the rhythm and diction.
4 years.
Yes.
And then this week, you read it at this event.
Yes. And so then what happened, during the writing is I was applying to tons of things. Grants was one of them. And my first grant from the city of Seattle. So that news came October 2023, and the grant cycle was 2024, 2025. And because it's Seattle's taxpayers' dollars that went toward my grant, I was contractually obligated to offer a public benefit. So I did this event where I presented kind of a stage rendering of about 15% of the memoir.
Cool. Suicide in the Mirror.
Yeah. And what that speaks to is, I actually do not have a mental illness diagnosis. I had just a long existential suffering. And so one of the, illustrations of my self-hatred was this disinterest in looking at my own reflection.
Totally get it.
And there's a term for that, scopophobia, where you actually have a fear of being looked at.
Wow.
And I don't know if you were raised this way, but I was raised by a father who, every week there's, some sort of a family affair. We had to take pictures and there was video cameras, and it was just constant.
Yeah.
And then when you look at the language of photographers, it's so interesting that they snap the picture, they capture your image, they shoot it, right? And that's definitely how I felt. Was there some aggression to picture taking?
I am clearly talking to a wordsmith here. You used a word that I've never heard on this podcast before. You said it several minutes ago. Heretofore. It's like, God damn, I better buckle up because this ain't no joke today. I love it. I know that you had a stage appearance with respect to a recent book. And you also mentioned to me before I hit record that you were invited to take part in an upcoming storytelling show, I believe through NAMI in Washington. Now, I have a background in that world, and I'm wondering your thoughts on sharing these things on stages.
Well, yeah, I was just talking to a friend who has a master's in counseling yesterday, and she talked about this notion of transference, which I'm not a psychologist, although I was raised by one. And so she was talking about my stage adaptation and how, she was sort of bracing herself for this transference from, my pain, my emotional rawness onto the audience, and how, that's a good reason for people not to listen to the stories is this notion of transference. It's like, I don't want to feel worse about myself and worse about the person and worse about the world if I hear this story that's really going to, infect me.
I am a guy, and perhaps no one cares. You're a grown up, not you, the audience. You're choosing to come. You can choose to leave. I'm gonna share my story. I'm not buying into this transference stuff. You can get up and go, because that's just like this policing stuff, and it's like, and so no one can talk. Who gets to decide what content can be discussed and how it should exactly be crafted? No. You know what the event is called. You know what's got.
No, three things. We're actually on the same page. Three things. One, I had a friend who's a PhD in nursing, and he said to me a couple of weeks ago in anticipation of my event, well, what are you doing to help, take care of the audience? Because someone could have a suicidal crisis in the middle of it, right? So I addressed that. And then I had a second nurse friend who the day before, she said, what if someone stands up and says, I want to suicide? And then during the Q&A, I had a former student who during the Q&A said, as a writer, don't you have a responsibility to tell these types of stories? And to all three of those people, I said no. In my defense, I said, hey, regarding the event, I said, I had a very explicit overview and also an age limit.
But once you're in the room, the idea that you could share something and someone would going to quote, I'm going to suicide is based, there's no data to support. It's absolutely ridiculous. That makes no sense that you would share something about your life and your struggles and someone would say, so I want to kill myself. But it bothers me because this is what stops people often from talking about this stuff, and it's rampant. I think it's like you're literally suffocating people and you're hurting them. You say that you want to do good and you don't want someone to get, no, I think you got it absolutely backwards.
Well, and one thing I said to my two nurse friends was, when we're in public, anyone can do anything in public. I can't, anticipate
100%.
what people are going to do
Absolutely.
in a public setting. And to my former student who asked that question, I said, I'm not responsible for another human being. And whether or not I want to share my stories or not share my stories, writers are not responsible.
No, I mean, now we're getting into a whole thing about art, right? Art and artistry and artists. Yeah, you get to do what you want to do and people consume it how they want to. I understand someone saying, well, there's different kinds of art. And if this art isn't, where it's written or spoken is about suicide, well, there's an asterisk there. But I'm like, does there need to be?
Well, here's one last perspective.
Yeah.
My father, who's a PhD psychologist, bereavement specialist, author of self-help books, and suicidologist.
Yeah.
He and I recently walked across the Golden Gate Bridge. And of course, we talked about the suicides.
Yeah.
And there is a plaque there. Mm-hmm. There's one plaque that is a memorial to someone who died on that bridge. Mm-hmm. It was, it's a plaque for, I believe it was a 2-year-old child who fell through some crack and died. Right. I said to my father, I said, why aren't there plaques for the others who have passed here? And he said, from his perspective as a clinician, and I don't know, I was just listening. From his perspective, he said that copycats do exist. Mm-hmm. And so shedding light at a place like the Golden Gate Bridge would be an impetus for others to do it. And I'm not arguing that for or against. I'm just.
Yeah, I mean, that type of stuff I don't know that much about. I'm sure it's a very real thing. I do think, though, that it should be said, and I'm sure this comes up, is copycats might copycat. Quote, healthy person's not going to walk by seeing that plaque that doesn't exist and just jump off the bridge. They're struggling hard. They're probably ideating, but yeah, we don't want to give the people just the extra. I get it. There's also another reason, and that might be the reason why there's no plaque. I contend that there's no plaques for people like that because by and large, our society judges suicide very harshly. We're not going to give you a plaque for killing yourself because by and large, we think that is cowardice and weak and selfish as a culture. You've heard the podcast.
Yes.
I want to know how you found it.
Since wrapping up my memoir and understanding that I have some control over, will I find a literary agent, and also don't have a lot of control over that. But I do have control over the ways in which I can try to share the story, meet other like-minded people. And so then I went on whatever, an internet search.
Sure.
So happy to meet you, Sean.
I'm really glad we were able to connect. You had tried to end your life when you were 16 years old, and I'm curious about what was going on that led you to try that and do that.
Nothing monumental. It was just my ongoing existentialism. I felt in many ways I didn't belong in terms of my social group and in terms of my home environment. I'm very lucky in that my suicidal crises did not include rape, incest, molestation, physical abuse, any of the big triggers. I was just really suffering and didn't know why I was suffering. And that was difficult. I couldn't point to one thing. So anyhow, I realized I had that my first suicidal episode at age 7. By age 14, I took a knife to my wrist. I think for me, it was just kind of testing the waters to know how did I feel coming close to seeing my insides. Realizing that by doing that, I crossed a line. And did I want to walk it back? Did I want to confess that? Or did I want to move forward? So anyhow, I grew up in Washington, but then we moved to Tennessee temporarily for my dad's PhD program. And then it came time for us to move back. Like the night before, I believe, that we were to head back to Washington, I took the family car and went and drove to the pharmacy and bought pills. I won't name the pills, but they were over-the-counter pills. And I bought what I thought was ample amount. So I had the means and the motive, and I just needed the opportunity. So 4 months later, at the end of December, when my folks announced that they were taking my little brother on a road trip and I had the option of staying home, now that was my opportunity. Because I knew better to know that I was going to do this. This was not, hey, adults, I'm hurting myself. I need help. This is way beyond this. This was like, I really do not want to ensure any intervention. So they left and I took the pills and it didn't work. And for a couple of days, I was sort of drugged out from those pills. It's all a blur. And they came back. I didn't tell anyone. And then 10 years later, I finally did tell them.
Oh, when you try to end your life, the way you frame that, it is not just, I wanted the pain to go away. It sounds like you wanted to die.
Actually, I didn't want to die, but I wanted to quit the mind that was spinning out. And since writing the memoir, I've been able to articulate the bifurcation that existed within my person for that to even happen. And what I call that is the me and the other me. So the other me is my assassin. And the me, is suffering. The other me, figured out, this is a way to go. I've been very fortunate. I've always been a good student. I've always had an able body. So it wasn't really even about dying. It was just about how can I be not conscious forever? Because this consciousness is causing me endless suffering, not just an episode of suffering, but suffering without cessation. That was the only way I could figure out how to end that. And, I also have to say too, I understand why people would turn to drugs or alcohol, right? It's a way to get out of their head. But I didn't want anything temporary. I wanted permanent way out of my thinking and my ruminating mind that was killing me.
And you mentioned briefly that it started young, 7 years old, you mentioned, right? That's young.
Yes. And again, had I not written this book, I would not even have figured that out. Well, I met with an energy worker, which I'm a woman of science. And so I don't necessarily, give a lot of credence to those sorts of things. However, also as a scientist, I'm very curious and open about different philosophies of thought. And so I had one session with this energy worker and she said, there's a child in you who needs some healing. How might you address her? And the next day I got in my car and drove about 15 miles to my old childhood home and just sat on the curb and looked at that old house and remembered the bully 2 doors down and started to put my head in that space of that youngster who was dealing with bullying, was dealing with a parent who didn't want to deal with my bullying, so I was sort of on my own. And I ran away from home for the first time when I was 7. And that was the revelation, like, oh, if there was ever a depressive episode number 1, I think this was it when I was 7.
Yeah. And then you said 14 with a knife, 16 was the attempt. What is it like? And I know we're going back a few years, but you did spend a lot of time in this space thinking about it and writing about it. And what is it like to try to end your life and you wake up and it sounds like you were groggy for a little while, but nonetheless, you're alive. And I would imagine all the problems, all the pain, it's still there.
I think thankfully I've forgotten a lot of the struggle that came from facing myself as a failure. And when I woke up, that was the feeling. You can't even do this right. And you're out of pills. And even if you could get more pills, your parents are coming home soon. So you had this window opportunity that you planned for, that you designed. And isn't that a celebration? That you had found your own way out of your misery. And to wake up from that was, I mean, in a world, it was terrible. And what's so interesting for me is I had some memories that I wrote about of like visual hallucinations. And I believe it was from the pills because I think I would have remembered having vomited them up. But I had visual hallucinations of like the carpet coming to life and the door undulating. And then it was still a mystery. Like, well, when did my parents come home and did they notice something different? For me, looking back as an adult, it's like, well, if you thought I was depressed then, you should see me now, you know? And so my father, who has for decades kept an audio diary, he went back in his archives and he said 2 things. He said, 1, we came back on January the 2nd and I attempted on the 31st of December. So I was alone for like 48 hours. And he said, secondly, I want you to hear this. And he played for me like 5 minutes of his audio that he recorded about a week after they returned home. So this is like the 9th of January. And he said, since we've returned home, Janee has been so loving, sitting next to me and putting her arm around me and sitting on my wife's lap. And she just looks at me now with such, I don't know, just such meaning in her eyes.
Wow.
And so obviously that really blew me away. And so then I thought, well, there's some fodder there artistically, like, let me figure this out. And so what was it? Was I clinging to them? Was I reconciling with having faced my own death, that I was clinging to these DNA contributors? Did I want their love and affection, which is something that I hadn't felt, that maybe was the thing that threw me toward wanting to die. I mean, there's so much to do there artistically, but a lot of it's still a mystery. But I can tell you this, when I awoke after the pills, it was not a glory hallelujah moment. It was you really screwed this up, kid.
Was his wife at that time not your mother?
No, I just said that in lieu of using their real names.
Oh, okay. Right. You said one parent didn't help you with the bully. Was that mom or dad?
That was the father, the psychologist who had decided, this is not escalating to physical, it'll be fine. And then, after the end of the school year, we ended up moving to a new school and that was over. But it was really hard for me.
And how much time goes by between that at 16 years old and the beginning of the 20-year period where you're doing okay?
So the bullying incident and the first depressive episode was 7. Then we moved to a new house, then to Tennessee. Then we returned, a suicide attempt at age 16.
Right.
Then went to college, came back. Couple of years after that, had a suicidal crisis where I was desperately trying to find a gun. I'll tell you this right now, were it not for Washington State's 5-day waiting period for a background check, I would have gotten that gun and used that gun. And so that law absolutely did save my life.
Okay.
And then years later, it was the pandemic. at the risk of revealing my age.
Right.
So it was the gun incident, and then it was grad
Yeah.
school, and then it was, being a professor, and then the pandemic.
And you waited 10 years from 16 years old to talk about it. 10 years of essential secrecy.
Correct. And if you read the little book written by Suicide Anonymous people, it talks a lot about suicide's ability to keep a secret, which is by design, and helps them to not have to face the consequences of their particular action.
Right.
So
Yeah.
definitely pros and cons to sharing, not sharing.
Right. So why'd you share at 26?
I believe, just piecing together from the memoir writing, I believe it was around that 10-year mark was around the time I had the incident with the gun. I'm just extrapolating that scared me so much that I disclosed. And also by this time, I was out of the parental house. I was making my own way I worked in organ transplantation for years. And so I wasn't under their roof. They had already paid for college, like they couldn't take the car away from me, right? So I could tell them over dinner and then dip out.
And how did they respond?
The response was pretty benign, like, "Oh, that's too bad. It's terrible. So sorry. We love you. Hugs." And so my hesitancy to outright answer that question is because I think then and still now I had a different expectation of their response. And I can see that I had needs and they had limits. I think I would have wanted let's lie on the couch together and snuggle. Let's order pizza. Let's get all the chocolate. Let's cry about this. Let's really get into it emotionally. Let's unwrap this. And it was just kind of like, hey, I got a flat tire on the way here. Oh yeah, too bad. Hey, I ran out of milk. Hey, I suicided. Oh yeah, that's right.
I've heard this more and more recently, and I never used to. People using a verb. I suicided.
Well, in other languages, it's quite common, actually.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. So after 26, you're living life. At some point, things are going pretty good.
Yes. And I think what helped was that I had launched. I was on my own. I was getting feedback from the world that I was capable, likable, and lovable, and getting these things that I hadn't necessarily found in the home. However, it turns out that I was a dry suicide. While I had quit the behavior, I had not drilled down to figure out why. And it wasn't until I had done that, then I could call myself a suicide in recovery.
When was that?
Again, I credit this writing project. And with the writing project, I was curious about the notion of suicide for survivors groups and realized that's not for me. It's for the bereaved. And the bereaved have lots of groups. And where's my group?
Correct. Yes.
And that's when, and some people are like, oh, you should start a group. It's like, no, I'm not a social worker and I can only do so much. And that's when I remembered AA, right? So I looked up AA and I found out that there are groups that are called open AA groups where anyone can attend. And so I walked into a room. My first AA meeting, even though I'm a non-alcoholic visitor still, was May of 2021.
Oh, wow.
And that's where I learned the language and the tools to move from dry suicide to suicide in recovery. And they've given me sobriety coins. As of July 2021, or July 14th of this year, I earned my 4-year chip. Now, not all, I just have to offer a caveat, not all open AA groups maybe would be as open to adopt someone like me. I was just super fortunate. And then I found out that there actually is a group for me, and that is called Suicide Anonymous. Go suicideanonymous.net on the internet. So while there are over 100,000 AA meetings worldwide weekly, there are about 6 Suicide Anonymous weekly meetings. And you can join those by Zoom. And through those fellowships, I have learned a lot. And I remember that I'm on a journey of wellness. so that it no longer is in my rear view mirror. It's something that I carry with me and remember that I've got this goal to work toward.
I remember I looked at the same thing. Is there a 12-step program or something like that for suicide? And this was a while ago, and there was one meeting. It seemed like it was an in-person meeting, but it was like a couple of states away from where I am. Like, damn, this is just not a thing. So I wonder, are they all virtual? Because in a way, it's easier that way.
There used to be an in-person one that happened in Tennessee. That's gone away. Now I see that there's an in-person happening in New Mexico. But yes, the virtual meetings happen about once a day.
And you've gotten something from that.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
It's anonymous, so we won't talk much about it, but I'm going to check it out. I'm curious. I've had a lot of conversations, and I don't think I've spoken to anybody who referenced that group. I'm a little surprised.
Well, I had to do a lot of research for this book. I read a book that came out in May of 2023, and this fellow referenced Suicide Anonymous. And I was like, look, I'm a researcher. I didn't find this out. I called my father, the suicidologist, who's been teaching death education since the 70s. And he's like, never heard of it.
Right.
I went to the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention. They don't reference it, because one of the tenets of SA is to not bring any undue attention onto the organization. But it's like, yeah, but y'all have been around since 96.
It's tricky. They want to let people know about it who need to hear about it, but they probably fear getting shut down.
Yeah, hard to say.
So the pandemic hits, about a year in? I don't know if you try again or you're ideating a lot. You said you were back in that space. Is that right?
Yeah. So the pandemic hit, and so I was spiraling out. I had decided to quit writing, teaching, editing, the whole, literary arts hat that I had been wearing for a while. Decided to quit because I just, the hustle, I couldn't do it anymore. I wasn't getting anywhere, getting a lot of rejections, even though at this point I had my third book had come out, made the horrible mistake of reading some reviews online. For all intents and purposes, they were just ridiculous, not like huge scathing, but it was another reason for me to hate myself and feel like a fraud. I decided, okay, I'm going to quit all of this and go back to being a scientist. So I applied for a job as a scientist, 6 figures, went through 6 weeks of, interviews. I had to write a scientific paper. I mean, it was very, very involved. They said, okay, it's you and another person. And then they ghosted me for weeks. I'm trying to get in touch with them. Like, okay, am I going to be able to pay my rent? Because I'm, just finally I got in touch with them. Like, oh no, we went with someone else. And I was like, what am I supposed to do? And that's when I called the friend, and she said, start a new project. So I started for many weeks just writing about the illness part. And after I exhausted that, I realized, like, if this is an actual book, what do people want to hear? So I did a poll. About 30 people answered my poll, and they said, well, if we were going to read a book about this sort of thing, we want to know how the author found hope, how she got help. And I was like, can't do it. Can't write the book. That's not me. That's not my perspective.
Right.
But the book was like, yeah, but come on, this is the next part. So for the book, I was like, okay, well, what does that look like? And that's when I started doing field work, one of which was going to this AA group just as field work, just to sit there and to think and take some notes. And by the end of it, I walk in and all these people are like, hey, I got a problem. And and then they're joking and laughing about it. And it's like the most beautiful illustration of humanity I'd ever noticed. At the end, we all stand around and hold hands. And there's I look around the room. I don't even hear that people are saying the Serenity Prayer, which I didn't even realize. I didn't even know it was a prayer then, but I look around the room. There are 40 people holding hands in a church basement. And I'm just crying, saying, this is so beautiful. And at the end of that, they're like, oh, you should come back. Oh, non-alcoholic visitor. Yeah, I should come back. And the next week I was like, sure, I'll go back. And so inadvertently had stumbled on fellowship and community that I didn't realize that I needed and craved.
Yeah. That helped.
It helped immensely.
And so you're not in that space now, or you're less in that space?
No. So now I started the memoir saying to myself, I'm a depressive and I'm a suicide. Now, 4 years later, I've denuded myself of these labels that I had branded myself. And I have now found a new way to proceed. It's like an alcoholic. You have to take it one day at a time. I mean, I can't predict if I'm going to pick up, so to speak, pick up that bottle tomorrow. I can tell you today, if I start going down the rabbit hole, I got the sobriety coin I can hold in my hand. I now know this serenity prayer by heart. I have figured out these things that have helped me, and I can lean on the tools that I've learned about recovery to help steady myself.
Wow. I would imagine if you wrote a book, you are open to talking about this. You wouldn't be talking with me, because one question I always ask is, who knows about all this stuff? I know at 26, you shared it with your folks. It sounds like people either know about it or certainly will know about it should they get their hands on a copy of Suicide in the Mirror.
Yeah, no, not a secret. Not a secret. And I've always been really open and transparent about, my things. I just never leaned into this as a story or as the story that I wanted to tell. I mean, there was already somebody in my family talking about suicide and writing a book about suicide. That was my father.
Right.
And he was out there helping the bereaved. So, and also PS, it's just not artistically, it's not something I've ever done. I write poetry. So why would I switch gears and look toward nonfiction? But at the time, I needed a challenging project, and the project begged that I get better.
And you became your own project in a way.
Correct.
Through the process of writing.
Correct.
And all that comes with that. In your case, it sounds like it's more than just sitting down at a desk. You were out there doing stuff.
Well, I don't know if you want to hear something really wild.
Always.
Okay. So this is not in the book. This is next project.
Yeah, we should say if you want to know all of it, you got to buy the damn book.
On the 3rd of June this year, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. So finally, I'm in the oncologist's office, and she says, okay, here are the treatment options: bilateral mastectomy, a lumpectomy with chemo radiation. Those are your 2 options. And I said, well, what about the third option of no treatment? She said, if you don't submit yourself to treatment, between 2, 5, or 10 years, your body will be ravished by cancer. She didn't say you'll die, but that was the implication. So I said yes to treatment. I had the surgery. In a couple of days, I'll be going in for radiation. I had 3 huge revelations. One, I actually saved my life physically by saying yes to the treatment, which is kind of shocking to me, and definitely would have been shocking to the 16-year-old me. Like, oh, okay, well, finally, here's your option. You don't even need to do anything. Just sit on your sofa for 5 years and you can die. So that was wild. Secondly, the stats for suicide among newly diagnosed cancer patients is 13 times the regular rates. So because I had done all of this great work on myself, I was able to even be in that headspace of saving myself, which is wild. The third thing was that one of my issues of existential ambivalence was feeling very distanced from my nuclear family. So during this cancer journey, they distanced themselves from me. My sibling contacted me maybe like 2 weeks after the diagnosis, and since then, nothing. My mother has texted a couple of times, never heard from my father. And so for me, it's actually symbolic of the cancer and how I'm attacking this space of, am I a survivor? Am I worthy of living? Can I do this on my own? Is actually confirmed because back then I felt a distance. I felt in the face of my crisis, they were AWOL. And in writing the book, I'm like, oh, my perspective was, and, in their defense. But now I can see, like, no, there are actually some people who cannot be there for you when you're in crisis. And that has to be okay, because acceptance is the best thing that you can do to just move on. So while I could focus on these 3 cats who have turned their back on me again in crisis, I'm choosing to focus on no fewer than 100 people in my life who are rallying and getting cards and extra chocolate cake and, so pretty wild.
That is wild.
The relationship between cancer and my suicidality.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if someone were to say to me, do you think it's more likely that people, your family, nuclear family, are they more likely to turn their backs on somebody who has cancer or somebody who tried to end their life? I would immediately say it's much more likely they're going to do that for somebody who tried to end their life. In many people's eyes, like shameful, uncomfortable, scary, whatever, fill in the blank. I wasn't expecting what you just said.
However, my family is unique because of my father's background. We had a very death positive household. We're constantly talking about it. And I remember I was young. He was like, oh, we got to go save someone. She's, threatening suicide. Let's get in the car, and I remember my first funeral. So we're very much talked about it. So for us, suicide was never stigmatized, something we were very, very open about.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I can just sort of generalize like crisis. My crisis today is similar to my crisis back then. Yeah, the subjects are a little different, but it's still a crisis and still survival mode.
Did you ever spend time in a psych unit of any kind, mental health?
Never did. No.
Never
did.
You're a writer, a poet, and you also said you were a science person.
Yes.
That's an interesting combination.
Yeah. Well, I mean, one of my failures is that I failed the medical college admissions test, didn't get into medical school. And so I had to pivot. That was really difficult.
What was your career? You said something about organ transplant for some time.
Yes. Yeah. We worked in an immunogenetics laboratory where we did the white blood cell cross-matching for the organ transplantations.
Okay.
So like if you're waiting for a kidney and then someone passes away and their kidneys are great, then we look at their blood, your blood, and see if, there's compatibility.
But you didn't do that for all of your adult life, right? You were doing other things.
I did that for a handful of years between undergrad and graduate school. Then I went to grad school for creative writing. Yeah, so as a scientist, I made really good money. And then for grad school, I went to a state school and did really well in the stock market back then.
Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Scientist. What was your science? What was your research? What was your focus?
So human anatomy physiology. Yeah. So and then I became a board certified histocompatibility technologist. But I was bored. I wanted more of a challenge. Went to grad school.
Poetry. Okay. So a lot of things, different things, interesting things.
Well, and I do think it's interesting because on paper, one might say like, oh, here's this person who's had these successes. How could she feel depressed? How could she feel like, her life was worth, cutting short? But, depression doesn't discriminate.
Certainly not. Does it feel comfortable to talk about it? Sounds like you're all right.
Fine. Are you okay?
Yeah. I'm fine. And you're in Washington State. Married, children?
I don't have children that I know of.
You can't steal that. That's a dude thing to say. That's biology. It's possible, but.
Well, actually, those are valid questions. I recently saw on Instagram, I think, someone was reposting this picture of this African-American jumper or would-be jumper on the Golden Gate talking to the police officer who coaxed him. This was over a decade ago, who coaxed him off. And the headline was, cop saves would-be suicide. And the would-be suicide went on to be married and have 2 children. I'm really hoping to dispel that that's the only way to have a happy ending after a suicide. So not married, no children, no partner. I'm just, doing life on my own. Yeah, doing me.
I feel like that idea of woman gets married and has children and lives happily ever after is in a lot of places. It's kind of everywhere.
Well, that attitude is also reflected in the literature. 100% of the books that I have read from a firsthand account end in either a marriage or a new baby, but mostly both. 100% of them.
Well, yeah. I mean, look at how most movies end, right?
Well, firstly, I believe that the reason why his story is so omnipresent is because of that attitude. That's what people want to hear.
That's what people want to hear.
So that's the soundbite that we want because it also supports the stigma and the shame around it. For someone to come out and say, I regretted it, is for someone to say, you are correct, society. I am shameful. You are right. I am wrong. You are right to stigmatize me. I did something terrible. My head is hung and I wish for forgiveness, etc. And then add the religious So I'll answer that question in a couple of ways. I absolutely believe that for the 16-year-old Janee, that was the best decision that she made, that something was going to break and she needed to make that decision for herself. So can't go back in time. And also I'm just the type of person. And again, this harkens back to the way I was raised, in most respects, really beautifully raised, or I guess reared is the technical term for humans, is that just don't regret. If we don't have bucket lists in our family. We just do the thing we want to do, right? So you're rarely going to hear me say of anything like, "Oh, I regret something that I did or didn't do." So I just accept that was something that I did, and it was absolutely the best decision that I made for myself at the time. When I started writing the book and I was in that space of illness, I was saying shit on the page that later gave me total cringe. And that was, do you want to hear that I say I regretted it? No, I'm not going to say that. Do you want me to say that life is precious? I'm not going to say that. Do you want to hear that I'm going to vow to live through it? I'm not going to say that. I was very smug, very cavalier about it. But then I realized, and perhaps my approach to my suicidality is different because of this memoir. So started in October 2021. Then February of 2022, one of my best girlfriend's brother died by suicide. And unlike you, I hadn't had that experience of someone close to me. And all of a sudden, I was catapulted in this grief space surrounding suicide. And I realized that I could not do that to any reader offering up this smugness. I mean, I was even like, I could be dead by the time you read these pages. This is a posthumous publication. And so I actually wrote an entire chapter dedicated to this man who suicided. Not actually dedicated, but with him in mind. And I talk about how I redacted these smug aspects in the book.
Okay.
And I'm like, underneath this censor bar is this thing that I said, that it's a terrible thing to say to someone who wants to know where there's hope, where there can be salvation. And so that aspect of the book was written by the person who I am today. And that is a person who is in suicide post-vention. We talk often about pre-suicide prevention, suicide intervention. Don't often talk about suicide post-vention. And that's the me who understands that people need to hold on to some grip of hope. So hopefully I answered your question.
It's an interesting response. Yeah. So you shared with me a little bit, or more than a little bit, about your post-vention. What's it like?
There were demons in my life, external, actual demons that I hadn't faced, didn't want to face, didn't want to see. And because the writing begged that I stare into that abyss and confront it and do things like get back on antidepressants, stay on antidepressants, find counseling, surround myself with people who can be present with me, who are emotionally available to me, these sorts of things. I am in probably the most healthy space I've ever been mentally, but I cannot take my eye off the prize, just like an alcoholic. Someday it's a day at a time. Someday it's an hour at a time. Like, for example, there were a couple of times I had the suicidal crisis in July of 2021, and it's no coincidence that 6 weeks earlier, I decided to quit my antidepressants. Oh, I feel fine. It's spring. It's my birthday. This is great. Went right down a rabbit hole. Oh, that was random. Actually, not random. Then another spring came. I feel great. Spring, the flowers. Oh my gosh, my birthday. Going on this writer's retreat. And I saw the train coming, and I went right back on them. And now, not to plug Google, but now on my Google Calendar at the end of April, I write, "Stay on your meds, you dumb fuck."
Okay, hang on one second. Not necessarily your memoir title, because it's already done, but "Stay on your meds." Again, tell me, please, what does it say?
You dumb fuck.
I'll tell you what. I'm picking it up to at least read the first chapter, or I might need a nice little subtitle, but I'm curious more than most books. Suicide in the Mirror, though. Okay.
So that's a message from me.
Yeah.
The other me in the future that might be smug and say like, you don't need that, Yes, I do. That's postvention. We have to come up with our own ways where we're taking care of ourselves when we're keeping our eye on the prize, just like the alcoholic.
So you were on and off meds, and it sounds like you were on and off therapy, in and out.
I've never been able to find a therapist, to be honest with you. I have a great psychiatric nurse for medication management, and she will see me more often,
Yeah. It's hard to find a good psychologist, isn't it?
Correct.
The reason I asked that, one, I'm simply curious, is the existential crises that you've experienced at points in your life, is that still there and you're dealing with it better, or is it actually faded some, or perhaps some combination of the two?
Good question. I used to be the type of person who wondered, why are there humans on planet Earth?
Big questions. Big.
What's my purpose? Why am I here? Am I doing it right? I realized that I have to stop those unanswerable questions because I'm not a philosopher. I'm not a philosophy professor. It's not my job to philosophize. It puts me in a world of hurt to ask those questions that have no answer that satisfies me. So I just need to just stop and instead say, look, you just filled the hummingbird container and the first hummingbird is floating around. Is she going to land and drink some of this nectar that you concocted? Isn't that amazing? And just stay in that moment.
Postvention.
Absolutely.
That's taking care of yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's figuring out my own triggers. So that's a way that I was triggering myself by asking these philosophical questions.
I always ask a question about the pink and purple pill. Not a real pill, obviously, but it's a pill that if I give it to you and you take it, you go to sleep and there is no pain and you don't wake up and nobody knows it's a suicide, what would you do with it?
Well, I can't take it because I have a new book coming out in February. And
after all the things we just said, it's only the book that's keeping you alive. What about the fucking hummingbirds?
Well, the hummingbird came and she left, and I don't know if she's still there, but I do know that I have this book.
Yes.
And I'm contractually obligated to, endorse it. And
So what do you do with the pill?
Well, what I learned from Suicide Anonymous, and this is where I'm getting a little emotional, actually. One of the things that I realized was that I hoard pills because pills, that's my weapon. And so one of the ways that I am to maintain my suicide ideation sobriety is by not hoarding pills. And when I had that first meeting and heard about this idea of stockpiling pills, I went to my drawer and realized that I had 300 pills, different kinds of anti-anxiety pills and extra thyroid pills and, prescription pills. So I actually cannot have any excess of any type of pills in my house because that's my method. And so a pill in my hand would be as, lethal. And I'm trying to be a recovered suicide. So. And that would actually make you a bad friend for giving me the pill. Let's just talk about, your culpability in all of this.
Sure. Yeah. It's all fictitious. We're just social experiments. So in your case, you'd probably, I imagine, chuck it.
I would have to. Out the window.
Don't throw it out the window because someone might pick it up.
Well, don't tell me what to do. It's a gift.
I know. You do whatever the hell you want with it. That's fair. When you think about suicide or recovery, that the word mental health, all of the stuff that comes up when we talk about these things, are there any myths or misconceptions you would like to call bullshit on?
The line "you are not alone" really bothers me.
I just had this conversation literally this week.
Are you pro or con?
Well, I saw it on a website. You could see it in a lot of places. And I thought, for some reason on this day, that's a really weird message. I know what you're trying to say. What you're trying to say is there are resources and perhaps some people out there that might be able to offer some support. But the way I read it was, I'm totally fucking alone. Don't tell me I'm not alone. That's not a good thing for me to read because it feels like you don't give a shit and you don't understand or you're not trying to understand. So you're nodding your head as if you kind of get that too.
Well, my head hurts from nodding yes. So, viciously.
I would way rather see, I know you're alone and maybe we can help out. Just acknowledge the truth of the matter.
Well, I'd rather see the bumper sticker honk if you don't exist, because at least it'll get me to chuckle.
I don't want to get crazy with the memoir titles, but that's also not bad. Yeah, but bumper stickers and billboards are good places to find ideas. I'm just saying. I don't know why.
Well, yeah, like I don't have a relationship with God, but the first time I went to AA, there was this huge banner on the bell tower and it said, "Mercy welcomes everyone." And I was
Mm,
like, that's beautiful. And another church marquee I saw years ago said, "Fears welcome here."
mm,
That was beautiful.
yeah. I'm almost always alone. But a lot of people I've talked to are feeling they're alone.
Correct.
Who are you messaging? I know what they're doing. There's a group of people that need to hear that. There's a group of people that are going to say, yes, good. But they're just missing a whole huge group of humans. They might be passively ideating, or an expression I recently heard was like soft suiciding, which might be the person who's drinking a lot or drugging. And in my experience, we're not open to hearing somebody who's struggling and thinking about it. And we just don't have a lot of space for that. I haven't found it.
Well, maybe you'll disagree with me, but I've been a writer for a very long time and
Mm-hmm.
I struggled how to articulate the feelings, how to illustrate the
Yeah.
darkness, the sadness. I don't know that the average person can do that very well in a way. You know what I'm saying? I mean, just it's a struggle. It's a huge challenge
Yeah.
to be able to attach language to this, ephemeral thing that hurts.
Yeah. I don't disagree with you, but I was focusing more on those people. Are you willing to listen? But your perspective is also the person who's sharing it. They just don't have the tools to articulate this kind of thing.
Yeah, it's very difficult.
Yeah.
Actually, the first 6 months of the book, I wrote and I felt very clearly this book could kill me because I was not only revisiting these past vulnerabilities, but I then was trying to enliven them, render them flesh and blood and tear and snot for the readers. I felt very sad for the
Yeah.
character who was also me. And, who wants to put herself through that? I wasn't under contract. At least if I had, my advance, that I'd be like, okay, push through it. But it was
Right.
just me, myself, and I working on it. So it's also understandable that people would be reticent because I don't want to open that wound. For what? For the glory of you thinking about it and then using it as an anecdote at the next cocktail party when I'm not there, right? What are you then doing with this? You're the receiver. What are you doing with this message? How is this helping? Because it's hurting me right now to go through it. And maybe getting back to the transference, maybe you're also feeling worse about yourself. Don't know.
But at the same time, you said that you found a good number of people who are with you, who are there for you. That was one of the things you mentioned earlier, right? As opposed to focusing on the people in your life who are not there for you now, you found this large group of people who are sending you flowers or whatever they're doing. And I would imagine if they're there
Yes.
for you in that way, some of them be able to have that, let's use the word empathy, or they can hold the space. They can listen to this stuff and just, it's okay. This is part of your experience in the world, your life.
Yes. However, I haven't shared my stories with strangers, and then the people like my uncle years ago, my God-fearing uncle, if you suicide, I won't attend your funeral. God loves you. He has better plans for you. How dare you, not exist in his glory. And so for us, then I realized, okay, we've got a limit. But people have all sorts of opinions about you,
Yeah.
especially as a woman, a childless woman, etc. So yeah, I can be vulnerable here with you, a new friend who's open to talking about suicide, and then all my buddies and celebrate, the writing. But I haven't been confronted with an audience member who might, chase me down an alleyway because she thinks I gave, her significant, right, the idea of suicide because, whatever. Yeah, it remains to be seen.
Nobody chased you down the alley last week when you did the thing, right?
No,
Okay.
fortunately.
And I hope that doesn't happen I don't know what story you're going to share and how you're going to share it at the Brain Power Chronicles. There'll probably be a larger group of people there, but I think you're safe.
Okay.
But
All
I
right.
understand it's a possibility. By the way, was it your uncle you mentioned? Was it his God, Jesus?
Yes, yeah. And actually he actually came around. Yeah, I shared with him a chapter of my book, and he said, "Wow, thank you for sharing that. It really seems like there was a disconnect in the family," which was very like, yeah.
Wow.
And then he
Well,
said he wanted to read my memoir, and he sort of came around, so that was cool.
very cool. Time. Funny.
Sure.
Let me just share something with you as someone who was brought up Jewish, never practiced, and is essentially agnostic. I think from what I've learned about Jesus, or the idea of him, if you suicided yourself, is that the right way to say it? You know who would be at your funeral, if he could be? Jesus.
Well, I have grace now in this wellness journey. I can have grace for this type of reaction, but
Yeah.
then, when he took a step back, he could say, "Wait a minute, my niece is telling me that she was hurting and I love her.
Right.
And so on second thought,
Mm-hmm.
let me listen some more." Just giving people some time to process and to,
Sure.
redirect their own ideas, their own schemas.
Your other books have nothing to do with suicide, I imagine.
Not a damn thing. No. It's my job. I'm a writer.
So you write a book because you didn't have someone sign you and give you an advance up front. You're like independently doing it with the hopes of getting a publisher. And you could do the indie publishing thing, right? Like 98% of humans do these days, where you just do your own thing and you pop it on Amazon and then you hustle and 7 people, hopefully a few people buy it.
Yeah. So there's traditional publishing and there's self-publishing. So
Self-publishing,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm, because I have a terminal degree, I'm an academic in academia. We don't self-publish. We're very interested in peer reviews right. So I've always gone the traditional publishing route.
Where the hell are they?
For a memoir, what I would have to do is send out queries to literary agents. And if someone gets interested to see if they could actually, not necessarily if the book is good, but if they can make money off the book, then they'll say, "Oh yeah, let me read the whole book. And then let me send it off to places to see if I can sell the book."
So if you write a book that may not get a lot of people to buy it, you're out of luck.
Not necessarily. I mean, some people would argue that the book served its purpose, and that was, it gave me a new leash on life. But again, as someone who's a writer, it's like, oh, well, I just finished this book. I'm really proud. This manuscript, not a book, manuscript that I'm really proud of. Wouldn't it be great for it to finally find a home and then get distribution? So
people could read it.
Yeah, so time will tell.
Sometimes I ask people a question about if you could talk to your younger self, but that's a little too Oprah for me. I don't love that question because time doesn't work that way. But you said something that I do want to ask about, and it does have to do with time. Because you said on your Google Calendar in April, you say the thing about taking your meds, you dumb fuck. Is there anything you can imagine putting on your calendar at some point in the future that you might want to read? And I imagine the way I'm thinking of it is years from now. Does that make sense? Help me ask my own question.
I'll help.
And this is why editing is so great.
Sure. In my manuscript, I have a place where I talk about, the sad young girl. I say something like, I cannot go back in time, to vanquish the bully or to beg my mother to love me, whatever it was. But I say writing this book for her is the best that I could do. So for me, the book is my love note to myself. But then also in sort of a less serious note, I had already confessed to you, I'm not really a past-oriented person. I'm also trying not to be a future-oriented person. It's just about the here and now. So in the here and now, what I'm doing for myself is talking to you, and I'm now expressing to you my gratitude for this platform and this space. And for me, this moment and us together, that's enough.
Oh, thank you. That's nice to hear. Well, what else do you want to share?
I think we've about exhausted it.
It's a gift that I offer. I bring exhaustion to the world. Everybody's trying, I suppose, as best they can. Thanks for listening and for talking with me.
Thank you.
And what's the rest of what do we got? It's 6:16 here, so it's like mid-afternoon out in West Coast.
I'm teaching a class. I'm teaching a class on Zoom in a minute.
What is it?
It's a creative writing class. It starts with play, word play and word association, and like how do people get started writing creatively. It's just about play and improv and.
Very cool. I hope that goes well.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks again, Janee. I really appreciate it.
Great meeting you, Sean. Don't be a stranger.
All right. Neither you.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye.
As always, thanks so much for listening and all of your support. Special thanks to Janee in Washington. Thanks, Janee. If you are a suicide attempt survivor or ideator and you'd like to talk, I'd love to talk with you. Please reach out. hello@suicidenoted.com. Learn more about this podcast on our website, on the podcast description, episode description. It's all over the place. Check it out. You might want to volunteer. You might want to help us with transcription, maybe donate, maybe learn about our membership, whatever it might be. Check it out. It's all there. You could just reach out to me if you can't find it or you have some questions, of course. However you are involved, I really appreciate it. And that is all for this week's episode. Stay strong. Do the best you can. I will talk to you soon.